I want you to imagine this. Imagine you've suddenly been asked to sing, solo and unaccompanied, to a room full of strangers, and you're not Leor. Perhaps your palms are sweating, your face is slightly flushed, perhaps your heart rate has increased, perhaps there's a tightness in your throat as you silently run through the words to the song, checking to see that you can remember them. Imagine yourself imagining that everyone in the audience is staring critically at you, waiting for you to stumble over the first line of that song. Imagine yourself standing in front of that critical audience, wishing you were invisible. Imagine feeling just like this every time you find yourself in a social situation with people you don't know intimately because you are shy. Imagine feeling as if your whole life you have been constrained by these feelings, that your whole life seems like a history of missed opportunities. Shyness is a state you inhabit, physically as well as mentally. Shyness can freeze you over and refuse to let you thaw out until you feel safe. And feeling safe is the hardest thing when you're shy. So what are we shy people actually afraid of? Why are our autonomic nervous systems telling us that there's a hungry lion about to pounce on us when in fact we're just minding our own business in the corner of someone's balloon-strewn living room? According to the experts, shyness is a temperament trait. That temperament trait is a spectrum from withdrawal to approach. Picture a bird on an electricity wire. If you're very shy, you're hanging around on the far left of the wire, the withdrawal end, staying away from the other birds, but every now and then chirping hopefully at them, hoping simultaneously that they'll ignore you and that they'll chirp back. Because you really want to be hanging around with the other birds, but you're also afraid of them. If you're shy, you're afraid of people because you're afraid of their judgment of you. You fear their negative evaluation. You fear their rejection. And there's a voice in your head telling you that you probably deserve their negative evaluation and their rejection because you're a bit weird and very afraid. And that very fear makes you feel a bit weird and hopeless. So maybe you are. And so the cycle goes on. If you're lucky, like me, you might find a strategy or two for hiding that fear or for setting it aside when it really counts, like in the workplace. In the workplace, I've had a collection of invisible superheroine cloaks that I could put on. I could be super greenie when I worked in the environment movement, or super comrade when I worked in the trade union movement, or super broadcaster when I was a presenter at the ABC, or super teacher when I lectured at the university. I could let go of my fear of rejection because, well, if people want to reject a super greenie, they're idiots. Anyone can see the world needs saving. But away from work, when I was at the pub or at a party, or sometimes even just having dinner with a couple of friends, the fear came back, and I had to keep my face very, very still so no one could see the fear. I suspect I would make a very good poker player with my still face. Except if there was a camera nearby, because cameras can see through my masks. Cameras unmask me, as do mirrors. Cameras and mirrors make me long for invisibility. So I try to steer clear of cameras and mirrors. Not so easy on a day like today. But staying away from mirrors is hard because mirrors are also useful for checking that the mask is in place. So why do we shy people need to keep checking? Why do we need to keep asking what if all the time? According to psychologists, shyness manifests as a form of social anxiety, or at its most extreme, social phobia. They're the people who can't leave the house. This anxiety usually provokes a range of physical symptoms, from blushing, trembling, sweating, hyperventilating and feeling physically stiff, to hypervigilance and hyper-awareness of one's physical presence in social environments. Shyness induces intense physical self-consciousness, kind of like a perpetual state of performance anxiety when in company. The shy person's mental preoccupation with how they're being judged by others stimulates all of those physical symptoms via the autonomic nervous system. And all of those visible aspects of arousal, the blushing, trembling, hyperventilating, etc., can in turn increase a person's feelings of self-consciousness. So in social situations, the shy body can easily become caught up in a distressing feedback loop of awkwardness and discomfort. Over years, even decades, these repeated experiences of anxiety-related distress, and sometimes just the mere anticipation of those experiences, can become inscribed upon the body. And deciphering these inscriptions has been part of my task in writing my memoir called Shy. In the book, I describe shyness as a kind of poison that enters my body, a slow-working poison of anxiety that's eaten away at my digestive system so that now I can really only comfortably eat what I ate as a baby. Squishy, easy-to-digest foods like potato, pumpkin, rice and porridge. Anything else hurts. I also describe a lump in my throat that used to appear every time I felt acutely socially anxious. Maybe you felt that too. A lump that no amount of swallowing could remove because it was a constriction, a spasm. It was like my own body was trying to strangle itself. My own body was punishing me for my idiotic fears. It's called Globus Hystericus, the hysterical globe in my throat that ironically only disappeared when I started trying to prevent the hysterical destruction of the globe when I was a super greenie. I also describe the marble blocks from which Michelangelo carved his exquisite religious sculptures, imagining that my shy body was like the immobilised, as yet unrevealed figures awaiting the artist's chisel to free them from their solid rock casing. Imagining my shy body as physically entrapped, longing for metamorphosis and for the chance to escape the casing of awkward self-consciousness and emerge fully formed into the waiting world as my true self. I describe the visceral sensation of liquefaction that can accompany the experience of social anxiety, turning to water. I describe my shy body temporarily liberated from anxiety through the liquefying sensation of sexual desire. I describe my longing to be limpid, a liquid state defined in my dictionary as absolutely serene and untroubled. I describe the way my shy body, weighed down by anxiety, revels in the weightlessness of immersion in surf. And I describe the sudden and traumatic end of a 10-year love affair. The moment of reckoning for someone who had spent her whole life desperately trying to avoid rejection because it was the thing she had feared the most. By some very strange and hideous coincidence, right in the middle of writing a book about this very fear, I was suddenly immersed in it in the worst possible way. It was a kind of extreme exposure therapy, you would call it if you were a psychologist. And suddenly I discovered what was at stake with this memoir. It's been said that at the heart of every good memoir, something needs to be at stake for the writer. And until that moment, I hadn't really known what that was. After all, I don't think anyone ever died from shyness. And at times it felt like total self-indulgence to be writing at such length about this topic and about myself. But suddenly what was at stake was my survival, really. How was I to get through this thing that threatened to drown me, or that threatened to make me want to drown myself? I've been told that, in fact, I've written 2 books, a book about shyness and a book about the end of a love affair. But they are the same book, even if in 2 parts, because they are about the same thing, really. They're about negotiating with feelings of rejection and loneliness, both of which can prevent any possibility of happiness. And it's a book about how I found a way out of my own circumpolar vortex of grief and fear. In the memoir, I also describe a condition called body identity integrity disorder, a rare psychological condition that makes people think that one of their limbs is an interloper, that it doesn't belong to them, and that it's quite possibly dangerous to them. So they have to get rid of it, even if that means amputation of a perfectly good limb. For me, social anxiety has been like a form of body identity integrity disorder, except that the interloper has been a temperament trait, my shyness, and I've been trying to get rid of it my whole life. I've been berating myself for its existence my whole life. It doesn't belong to me, I thought, and it's dangerous, it gets in my way. So at the end of writing Shy, a memoir, I haven't managed to get rid of my shyness, as I had hoped. Research, information, and extreme exposure therapy are sometimes just not quite enough to contend with the power of DNA. But I have come to this realisation that even though my shyness won't go away, it can be managed. And I have been managing it, pushing myself over a million small cliffs in the effort to not let shyness get in the way of me doing many of the things I've wanted to do. In fact, shyness has actually helped me to achieve the things I might never have achieved if I hadn't been so afraid. I was so determined not to let that fear get in my way. And I found strategies like focusing on helping other people as often as I can. It's a selfish kindness, because when I'm thinking about others, I can stop worrying about myself for a moment. I can make small talk when I meet a stranger now, because I can tell myself I might be helping that person get over their anxiety about small talk. And I've found creative escapes, like writing, in particular, writing a book in which I tell the reader every little shameful feeling of anxiety I've ever dealt with, risking every invisible reader's negative evaluation of me. More extreme exposure therapy. And after all, as the songwriter Morrissey from the Smiths sang in a famous 80s love song, shyness is nice. Shyness has its own gang. It comes with a whole bunch of positive character traits and qualities, like empathy. Shy people care about what other people think and feel. Sometimes too much, but too much is better than too little, don't you think? If we were all dominating extroverts, there would probably be even more wars, possibly only wars. And maybe there would be fewer good writers, because being a writer usually requires you to think carefully about how other people think and feel. So imagine this. You're standing in front of an audience of strangers who you've suddenly realised are not here to judge you. Your hands aren't trembling, not so much. Your face is not flushed, and you don't feel the need to be invisible. Because these people here, these people sitting quietly and generously listening to you talking about your shyness, are quite possibly a bit shy too. You're in good company, and that makes you happy. And sometimes that can give you the courage to sing. Seid ihr hingesehen, glaub ich blind zu sein, wo ich hin nur blicke, seh ich nach der schwersten Spiele nicht begehr ich mehr, möchte lieber weinen, still in Kümmerlein, seit ich ihn gesehen, glaub ich blind zu sein.
If you go to this supermarket and shouting, I want to buy peace of mind, then people laughing or people feel that person's mind is something wrong.
Now, this word connections is a really interesting one because our kids today are more connected than ever.
Of course, then when you're in an institution, people call you up. They tell you to perk up. Yeah, perk up, because I didn't think of that.
I should have a happiness project, I decided. As soon as I have some free time, I'm going to do that.